We're good. So if I could just start with Simon Thomas, please, if that's okay.
Yeah, hi guys, how are you?
Hi,
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, good, thank you. As you've got a nip, Shane, I'll do you first if that's okay. Can I just ask you, with the Welsh hat on, looking at the URC now? It was obviously quite tight amongst the Welsh sides last year. Cardiff eventually finished as a leading one. When you survey the season, Shane, who do you think at the moment is best placed to perform highest among the Welsh teams?
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? I think, we spoke about last season where probably Cardiff were looking the strongest as regards to squad. The Ospreys were looking pretty good as well, but I think if you look at the Jusset and the players kept and how they've kind of looked to the next couple of seasons, the Scarlets seem very, very strong. Fortunately for them, they haven't lost too many players because of the issues with the wages. They've got some good youngsters coming through as well. We saw glimpses of Sam Costello in the World Cup, and now he will be touted as the next number 10 for Wales moving forward. So there'll be huge emphasis on him. I know, he'd have taken a lot out of the World Cup, and I just gutted for the fact that his pass led to the try for Argentina at the end. But we've forgotten about that now, and I hope for his sake as well he has. And there are still a couple of good foreign signings, and I just think moving forward they'll be the happiest when the season starts. And when you look at teams like Cardiff, lost the likes of Liam Williams and Jared Evans, really big important players for them. Ospreys without Anscombe now, who they certainly would have wanted to be fit a little bit more. No Ali Wyn Jones, and I think the Dragons as well. The Dragons will look pretty strong. They'd be happy with their recruitment, and they'll certainly be happy with the fact that they haven't lost too many players either. But we've got to be honest, for the regions, it is going to be a tough couple of years with the way things have kind of worked out with with wages, etc. But still able to compete, I think. But the Scarlets and Dwayne Peel will be relatively happy with what they've got there, and we want to build on that.
Can I ask you, Stephen, from the Irish perspective, Munster last season, they kind of came up on the rails in a way. Tough start to the season. I think 6th they finished in the table, and then did it all away from home. Perhaps a little bit under the radar, but is it different now? Is there a bit of target on Munster's backs after they won that title last year?
I don't think there's a target on Munster's backs. No, I think it was a weird one, wasn't it? Like Munster probably started off. I know it's maybe slightly different in other countries, but there seems to be like this where you're positioned as a province within Ireland. So like there's always this rivalry that, oh yeah, Ulster are now second or third, or Munster are fourth, and that's where Munster were. Like at the start of last season, they were fourth, and that's what all the chat was about the country, was that Munster are now the worst province. And then they grew throughout the season, and it's turned on its head. They're now, well, they are the number one, and that we're all trying to chase them down. So I think I think you have to just give them credit that they found their way during the season. And yeah, it wasn't pretty at times, and yes, it wasn't perfect, but they were able just to manage a couple of games and peak at the right time. And that's something that us as a country aren't very good at. And I think even the other provinces in Leinster and Ulster just have struggled over the last few seasons. And Munster being coached by Graham Rowntree, a guy who's used to the semi-finals and finals throughout his own professional rugby career. I think that sort of showed off in the way that the lads performed for him. And that semi-final against Leinster, honestly, it was one of the best games of rugby I've ever witnessed. It was unbelievable. And I know it wasn't full bore, full strength teams on show, but the quality of rugby was excellent. So I fully expect those two sides to be up challenging again this year. And Munster will certainly want to defend their title.
Yes, Stephen. And just lastly for me, for Chris, it's a different situation in Glasgow and Edinburgh. Glasgow, Franco Smith's been there for a year now. Whereas Sean Everett's come in, former Sharks coach. What's the kind of feeling about the balance of power going into this season in Scotland?
I think what you have is you've got a contrast, don't you? You have a lot of knowns, or potentially a lot of knowns with Glasgow, how they play, the style of play, the combative spirit they've got. There'll be a bit of unfinished business as well in terms of reaching the final of the Challenge Cup and falling short, and also then losing at home to Munster in the quarter final last year. So there's more to come from Glasgow, and as a result of how their season ended. But there's a balance to it. There's an understanding. There's a hard edge. You know really what's coming. You know it's going to be a tough trip for whoever goes to Scotstoun. Last season, they figured out ways of winning on the road. The first 2 or 3 journeys they had away from home didn't go well, and Franco's such a shrewd and good coach that he figured out how to get over that hurdle. So there's a lot of known with Glasgow. In contrast, there's a lot of unknown with Edinburgh. Sean's come in. He's not had a huge amount of time to work with the players yet, but there's an excitement. Ben Healy coming in at 10 is a big move for Edinburgh in terms of having an out-and-out kind of game management, game controller. Will he add that balance to the wide, flamboyant Edinburgh attack that they usually do with the talent they've got on show with Doohan and Darcy and Blair Kinghorn and Buffelli, Bill Mata? There's a lot of talent. So there's a bit of unknown towards Edinburgh, but I think Ben Healy will help glue some of that talent together. But listen, when both sides have, as everyone can say, when both sides have their international players available, they're going to be, I believe, a really, really tough nut to crack. So, it'll be really interesting to see how Edinburgh go this weekend. They open up against Dragons. Dragons, as Shane says, one of the stronger, more cohesive units in Wales, are a tough nut to crack at home as well. So, we'll find out slightly more after the opening weekend. But the big thing for Edinburgh is to be more combative, more competitive than they were last year, finish higher up that league. And similarly for Glasgow, the big thing for them is to go 1 or 2 steps further than how it ended last year. But with international players available to them both, they should be taken really seriously.
Oh, that's great. Thanks all 3 of you. Much appreciated. Enjoy the season.
You too.
Yeah, if I can just come in with a question for Chris there to kind of follow on from that. You kind of touched on it there, Chris, about Glasgow maybe having a wee bit of unfinished business after the way the season finished against Munster and the game against Toulon as well. But in a lot of respects, they kind of performed above expectations last season when Franco Smith came in. I'm not sure anyone quite expected it to be such a good season. Is it tough to then follow that up, second time around?
I think that's the toughest thing to do for anyone, isn't it? It's I think getting over the hurdle of winning something, and Glasgow have won the championship before, it is probably the biggest hurdle. But the next biggest thing is maintaining that level of quality when there is a target on your back. Now, Glasgow, I think, overcame that a lot last year. I think they did come in under the radar, but if anyone who's ever spoken to or been around Franco, they knew that it certainly was going to be a hard edge and they were going to be really combative. I think what gives Glasgow a good opportunity to build in last season is the consistency they have. They haven't made a huge amount of signings. Henko Venters came in the back row from the Sharks, somebody Franco knows well. And there's been, acquisitions of good Scottish talent back, Kyle Rowe, Logan Trotter. Greg Peterson's coming back to add a bit of bulk to cover injuries at the moment. So I think for Glasgow, there's a really similar core of squad. I know Franco will add layers to the attack and defensive side of what they're trying to do. So I think in order to progress forward and do better than last year or be, add to the unfinished business, it's much easier if there's a real sense of familiarness in terms of squad and coaches, and they've got that. So, yeah, it will be difficult, but I think that the familiarity and the added extras that I'm no doubt Franco will add, I think there'll be a force again.
Yeah, and just looking at Edinburgh as well, with Ben Healy coming in, it's an unusual scenario where a team who struggled last season have a guy coming in who was part of a team who won the title. But, Ben Healy, you would imagine, should be good for Edinburgh, and Edinburgh should be good for Ben Healy because he's going to get regular game time, and he's playing with Doohan van der Merwe, Darcy Graham, Blair Kinghorn, potentially one of the most exciting backlines in the competition.
Yeah, Ben's obviously Scottish qualified and Scottish international player now. So for him to play in Scotland under the noses of the selection is great. Although obviously he's got the championship winner from last year. I think he was a big part of the final 3 or 4 games, that run where Munster went all away from home. He was a big part of that. More so coming off the bench rather than starting. So there'll be added pressure to come to a new club and starting a lot of the games, as I assume he will, although Charlie Savala's still there. Cameron Scott started a couple of pre-season games and done really well. So yeah, the challenge for Ben will be to pick up all the new surroundings in a new environment and then bring his stamp. I think Edinburgh have signed him for what type of player he is. He'll have to run the game, direct the game, but then you'd be foolish not to bring in the quality that you've mentioned, left, right and centre. So I think a lot of people are excited by signing. I think there'll be a few in Ireland that'll be a bit disappointed that he's left Munster and he's out the Irish system. But I think we'll see a lot of game minutes from him, and hopefully having an influence from an Edinburgh point of view.
Yeah, and just finally from me, Chris, putting your Scotland hat on, when you look back at the World Cup, the 2 quarter-finals that we saw last weekend, I think most people would probably agree they were worthy of being finals in terms of the quality that we saw. Scotland have kind of been put in this bracket maybe as being best of the rest. I don't know if that's fair or not, but when you look at how far those 4 teams are ahead of everyone else at the moment, how do you go about trying to close that gap?
I think it's really difficult. I mean, the standard of the quarterfinals last week, we've spoken about already, was just on another level. It's international rugby, which is up another level as well. For Scotland, I think if you look at the quarter-finalist opponents, Scotland have had big results and big performances against all of them, but over the last couple of seasons, but not consistently. Ireland's probably the one where we've not got close enough to. I think last year in the November test, it was really close with the All Blacks here. It was pretty close to Springboks before that. We've beaten France already this calendar year. Almost did it away from home in Paris in February. So I think we're very close, but being close is one thing. Taking that step is probably the bigger step. Getting close to them is one thing, the top 4, but then overcoming them is another thing. So that's the goal. And I'm sure with quality performances across the URC, the 7 weeks I think is really important. There's 7 back-to-back games in URC, and I think for the Scottish national players and for Scotland, that the more of those 7 games that the international players can play back to back, get off to a good start, apply the pressure on the other teams within the league, could hopefully help Edinburgh and Glasgow, but help Scotland as well with with big game players playing in big game moments from weeks 1 to 7 before it breaks for Europe. So I think this will be the longest block of URC we've got. So getting consistency through that period as individuals and as teams, I think will help Scotland come Six Nations.
Cheers, Bossy. Top man.
No worries.
Hi, can we go to Stephen now?
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. My first question is to Stephen. Stephen, can you just give me your thoughts on the value add of Stephen Kitsoff at Ulster? Or what do you think he could mean to Ulster?
Yeah, no worries, Stephen. I think when Stephen Kitsoff was announced as a replacement for some of the sort of homegrown guys that have been knocking around for a number of years, the likes of Andrew Warwick, the likes of Callum Reid, guys who are still knocking around the squad, but they aren't good enough to take Ulster on to the next level. So there was always this chat that, BJ Botha, even he put up on Twitter after the quarter-final when South Africa beat France, no scrum, no win. And it's hard to argue with that. And, if Ulster have Stephen Kitsoff, Rob Herring, and either Marty Moore or Tom O'Toole, it'll certainly help when they come to the bigger games and knockout games of being a little bit more dominant at scrum time. But, there's a bit more to Stephen Kitsoff's game than just scrummaging. He's very good around the park. He's a really good carrier. He's half decent over the ball. Well, most of the time, even though he gave away a couple of penalties at the weekend. But He's very durable. Very rarely gets injured. The only thing is, how long is he going to play for us this season? You know, he's obviously still going to play international rugby. He's going to be at the Rugby World Cup for another 2 weeks. Then he'd probably get another couple of weeks off, and then he'd probably come into Ulster the week before they go into the European games. So, like, it's all about getting off to a good start in this competition, or trying your best to do so. Munster obviously proved that wrong a little bit last year, but I think it's really important that Ulster do that with the fixtures that they have. And Stephen Kitskoff obviously is a huge signing, but there's also a lot of chat that he's on ridiculously big money. And when you purchase a player like that, you want them to perform every single week at 8 or 9 out of 10, and that's something maybe that Dwayne Vermeulen and Marcel Coetzee, who was out injured for so long, even Charles Piatow, he was out injured for large parts of his Ulster career. I think the marquee foreign signings for Ulster have to be guys that are going to play week in, week out, a bit like Ruben Pienaar, Johan Muller, John Afoa, when they played for Ulster 7-8 years ago. So I think that's what Ulster are hoping, that Stephen Kitskoff's the type of player that they can start to build the team around.
In the past 2 seasons, the discussion has often been early on who can stop Leinster, and it just hasn't worked out that way. Do you think that is that just by coincidence, or do you think Jacques Nienaber could perhaps give them an edge that takes them, just that little bit further in terms of in terms of chasing the title?
Yeah, I think probably you will see a different Leinster on the other side of the ball in defence. We all know the way that South Africa like to defend. The intensity that they bring off that obviously leads to opportunities when you turn the ball over. So I think, yeah, he's a coach that brings teams to Rugby World Cup finals and wins them, and he'd be a great guy to have in there in Leinster. I think also it's important, like, everybody thinks that the coaching staff at Leinster is good, and why change it? And I know there's the old English coach Lancaster is moving on over to France and everything, but the other lads might back me up on this. I think it's good not to have change of voices. It's a good thing to have, like, every 3 or 4 years that you bring in a new coach, or you bring in to freshen things up. There's nothing worse than sitting in an environment that goes a little bit stale. And I think that's what Leinster sort of has become over the last 3 or 4 seasons, because they've fallen short on so many occasions. And I think Nienaber will be one of these guys who will really bring in a new approach, and one that I personally feel will bring Leinster to another level next season. And even without Johnny Sexton, I still fancy them to be competing for silverware at the end of the season, if not lifting it.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephen. Is that it? Have you got any more questions, or are you okay there?
Yeah, if there is time for Shane, it would be great.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, Shane.
Hi.
Shane, I don't know to what extent you follow the English game, but Ben Loader has signed with the Stormers, the wing. I mean, is that kind of, would that be a good move for him and a good move for the Stormers?
Well, time will tell, won't it? But one thing you do get from the Stormers is an open, expansive game. They've got the forwards to get them on the front foot, and they do like to get the ball out wide and involve wingers in play. We've seen that from, like, Renze, in South Africa, the players like Renze and these guys that really want to get involved in the game. Loader seems that kind of player. He seems to have the work rate to want to work hard and come off his wing and get his hands on the ball. and I'm sure that'll be the right move for him, really. I enjoy the way that the Stormers play. They are attacking minded. They don't mind kind of throwing that ball out with Williams and Libok and these guys that play with pace and want to get their wingers involved. And certainly what it will be is a step up in pace from the English Premiership, where it pretty much is forward orientated, and then have a look what we got behind. But the way that the Stormers play, they tend to mix it up pretty well. So like I say, time will tell, but they've obviously done the homework on a player like that's young enough as well to learn, and that's what you will do by moving clubs, by moving to a different league and different system. You become a more experienced player and a better player for it. So I'm sure that'll be the case for this one.
And just in your experience, I mean, you were around for so long and played under great leaders as well. When you take a guy like Kitsoff out of a team, like the Stormers, when you take a big personality like that out of a team, how does a team, is it difficult for a team to adapt to that kind of scenario?
Look, he will be sorely missed, because he's one of the best props in world rugby, certainly. But when you look at a team of Stormers quality, there are enough experience there. There are enough players within the system that will kind of take over that mantle. Obviously, they have strength and depth in the forwards there, but they have quality players as well that will keep the system going, will keep the players going. And I think what we've seen with the Stormers is, during URC, when their big players are out injured or they're not selected or they're rested, that they can still go away from home and put 40 points on teams. So even though it's a big loss, it's always a big loss to lose a personality like that and a player that the younger players will aspire to be. The Stormers have abundance of quality like that. So I don't think it'll affect them as much. And it's only going to bolster Ulster's squad, of course it is. But the Stormers being the Stormers, they have enough strength and depth. They have enough quality to kind of be able to adapt without Kitsoff, I would say. But he's a huge player to kind of lose. I'm just gutted that he didn't come over to Wales, because we need our regions strengthened up. Unfortunately, we don't have the finance, but he'll be a quality player for Ulster. But there's plenty of quality in the Stormers at the moment.
Are you guys taking World Cup questions, or is there only about URC?
Stephen, if I could just for a second, because I know Shane's got to go. Pat wanted to ask him questions, so if I could just go to Pat now, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Hey, Shane, how's it going? I'm just going to ask you a quick one before you go, and then maybe throw it to Stephen and Chris as well. Just looking for a couple of players to watch, or guys that we might want to keep our eyes on, whether that's kind of a young player coming up from the academy or a new sign, and just anybody you're looking forward to seeing this season in the URC.
Yeah, well, look, there's a number of players. I think I obviously look at Welsh players, but Darcy Graham, I know he's not a youngster. I was just talking to Chris about him. Now, I'm just such a big fan of Darcy Graham. I think he's absolute quality. What he did in the World Cup, and unfortunately, got injured against Ireland. But plays like that really make me want to watch rugby again. Players that have that work rate, that come off their wing, score lots of tries, aggressive and gutsy in defence. With Rio Dyer at the Dragons as well. Worked his socks off this World Cup, and just unfortunately didn't get on the end of any passes to kind of show what he could do with ball in hand. And the big one for me, and again, it's homegrown really, but it's to see how Jack Morgan, develops and goes after becoming the captain of Wales. He's been one of the top performers in the URC for a number of years now. I don't really remember him having a quiet game or an average game, to be perfectly honest. He's just been made captain of joint captain of Wales. Unfortunately for him, Wales get knocked out at the quarter-final stages, which can be damaging. But I think he's the kind of player that will kind of brush it off and look to put that effort back into the Ospreys as well. So I think you know, there's a number of good players in this URC. There's a number of good young players as well coming through, and there's a number of young players that have had the experience of a World Cup, and we want to build on that as well. So I think that's what makes this URC so exciting this year. You know, just coming off well, it's not over yet. Well, it is for most of us, but off an amazing World Cup. And, you know, we just need to kind of build on that and make sure these youngsters get a lot of game time, that they get exposed to what is a fantastic championship, and can build for their clubs and regions, and then put it into the international stage. And that's what it's all about, really. So, yeah, it's an exciting year of rugby. The young talent needs to step up to the plate, especially in Wales, because we've lost so much experience and kind of those big name players that, you know, put bums on seats, and puts these youngsters in a good position now where they have to perform. They have to play rugby. They have to go to the RDS. They have to go up to Edinburgh and play some of the best teams out there. They have to go to South Africa at 18, 19 years of age. But that's, I think that's a good thing. And I think that's somewhere where we're gonna see some real shining talent come through during this URC season.
Perfect. Thanks, Shane.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Pat. That's great. If it's okay, Stephen, we'll do World Cup questions at the end, if that's okay. And I'd like to go to Michael Sadler next. If you could just obviously direct who you want to speak to, Michael. Thank you.
Hi, it's Stephen. How are you doing, Stephen? You well?
All right, Michael. Yeah, good, Michael.
You good?
How's things?
Oh yeah, fine. Stephen, I just wanted to ask you, obviously, an Ulster-oriented question. They're talking a lot about evolving their game, or potentially evolving their game. Do you see them actually doing this? And how successful do you think they might be? In other words, what they're saying is they want to try and get away from a direct approach and use the artificial pitch to play a very fast brand of attacking rugby. Can you see that?
Well, they play on plenty of plastic pitches throughout the year, and they train on a plastic pitch every single day. So I don't know why they wouldn't have already tried to implement this different game plan that they are maybe churning out to the media. I think, Michael, they're maybe saying that, but they're trying to do what they did last year, just a bit better, I think, is what we'll probably see. With the Stephen Kitskoff coming in, their set piece will obviously be a little bit stronger. I think it's a make or break year for Billy Burns. I know Cooney's out injured at the minute, so Nathan Doak came, shooting onto the scene, and everybody was talking about him potentially reaching a Rugby World Cup with Ireland, and then all of a sudden he has a pretty mediocre second season, and second season syndrome, or whatever you want to call it. He didn't reach the dizzy heights that he did when he first came on. So I think it's an intriguing season for Ulster, Michael, because there are so many players that haven't been performing to their potential. I've named a couple there: James Hume, Jacob Stockdale, Rob Balakoon, all this exciting, unbelievable talent that all the other countries and teams within the URC talk about. Well, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it on show for what feels like an eternity. And I think Connacht coming up to Belfast in the URC last season and doing a number on us, and let's call a spade here. It probably should have been by another 10 points than what it was. So it's a season for Ulster where I think there's obviously been a bit of a turnover in some of the players, and there was chat that there might have been a bit of a change in coaching staff, but that all seems to have been blown over pretty quickly, and it's a bit of exactly the same as what was on offer last season in terms of the coaching side. So, Michael, I don't know is the answer to your original question. I don't know if we're going to see a different style, and we'll have to wait and find out. But what I do know is if they play the same way that they did in the last 3 months of the season last year, they'll be struggling to make the playoffs.
Also, another one to you. As a player, you know all about the disappointment of having played there and not having achieved what you thought you might achieve in knockout rugby, which Ulster know everything. They know all about it. They've written the handbook on that. How difficult is it for those guys when you're in that position to pick yourself up again? And especially when, I think you've already alluded to the Leinster situation, when things aren't freshening up, and we have, a coaching staff really who largely, quite a number of them, been in situ for a number of years now.
Yeah, there's chat that the likes of Ian Henderson coming back from the Rugby World Cup, that he might be getting an operation. There's obviously Stuart McCluskey is going to be on a rest as well, the other guys. So, what is Ulster's strongest 15? We might not see it for, 6 weeks' time, 8 weeks' time. And I know they've got a wide enough squad, but Michael, you touched on the style of rugby and what they're trying to do, and they're mixing it up and changing it up. Well, the pre-season games wouldn't fill us full of confidence in terms of the 2A games against Connacht, where we get pumped by 50 points in both of those, and we actually had a strong enough team out that day in Ballynahinch. Again against Leinster, Leinster had a Mickey Mouse side out, and we had a much stronger team and conceded a shed load of points again in the second half of that match. That's where the sort of worry is, and that's where it was last year, Michael, was in our defence. And we were conceding too many easy scores, too many points. And there's going to be a lot of pressure put on Johnny Bell, Dinger Bell, as we know him, this season, because he seemed like if there was going to be one person that was going to be the fall guy for Ulster not achieving what they wanted last season, it probably would have been him. So yeah, I think there's going to be huge pressure on him and Dan McFarland this season to see some progression. Because you and I both know that the supporters are absolutely up in arms about this pitch. Like, this pitch, honestly, could have 2 or 3 people sacked by the end of the season. And the reason I say that is because if they get this brand new pitch in, there isn't a change of style and a change of results and a change in winning a home quarterfinal or semi-final in the URC, the supporters will go absolutely daft. Like, they'll be like, well, what's the point? What's the point in changing the pitch? Like, you spend X amount of money on this pitch and we're not getting any better. So Dan, explain that one. So as I go back to the point, this is a huge season for Ulster Rugby. I honestly feel that this is a real make or break season for Ulster in terms of, if they don't go well, it could be a 2 or 3 year cycle before we see them back up competing again for silverware.
Just one more from me again to you, Stevie. Back row balance. How do you see it going with Ulster? They've obviously got Dave Ewers, quality player, Nick Timoney, quality player, no Dwayne Vermeulen now. Well, what do they do? Who is, third piece of that jigsaw? Who is it? We don't seem to have any idea.
No, I still think we're not sure who it is. I was working with Jerry Flannery last weekend, and he was like, "Oh, Stevie, talk me through the Ulster team for next season." And we went through, and he goes, "Well, who's going to be playing 6?" And I said, "Probably Dave Ewers." He's like, "Who's going to play 8?" I said, "Probably Nick Timoney." He said, "What about 7?" I was like, "I have no idea. I have no idea." Marcus Ray, Tommy Raphael, Matty Ray, like Dave McCann. I don't know, bring in somebody else. Like, the back row was mental last season. And as we've seen from the Rugby World Cup quarter-final, the back row is where it's won and lost, like most of the big games. So yeah, Ulster need to sort that out and see what the best combination is going forward. And it almost feels like, and you know this, Michael, that somebody's in favour for a while, and then they might have one bad game, and all of a sudden they're in the wilderness for 3 months, and then somebody else comes in and they go well for 3 weeks, and then they have a bad game or an average game, boom, gone, see you later. And I'm not sure if that's good for a player's confidence either. Like, it should almost be an arm around the shoulder and give them the confidence to go out and express themselves. But one thing for sure, Nick Timoney's going to start, and Dave Ewers is going to start. Whether that's 6 or 8 or 8 or 6, we'll wait and find out.
Thanks, Stevie. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thanks, Michael. I'm conscious of the time, and Shane is still with us, which is brilliant. Are there any more questions? Can you just put up your hand if there's any more questions for Shane? Otherwise, I was just going to ask you, Shane, just before you go, if you could just leave us with a parting thought on, a lot's been said about the URC in terms of, record attendances, everything's sort of going in the right trajectory. What are you kind of looking forward to most from this season, and specifically from the Welsh regions?
Yeah, it's quite a strange time for the Welsh regions, isn't it? Because of the wage cuts and so on and so forth. We lost a lot of quality players overseas, unfortunately. But I'm just looking forward to seeing the younger players have an opportunity. There's still strong squads within the regions. We've already spoken about that. The fact the Scarlets have still a number of their quality experienced players. The Ospreys still have the likes of Tipperick, George North, etc. So the regions still have these experience, but there'll be a lot of younger players getting opportunities this year in the URC, which will probably mean that it'll be even more difficult again to compete against the likes of the Glasgow and Edinburgh away from home, South Africa, Leinster's and the Irish province. But it's not a quick fix. Welsh regions are looking for. They're looking to strengthen their squads. They're looking to get players come through the system quicker, and as probably the hand has been forced. So for the regions, as ever, it's always a competitive championship. It really is, especially with South Africa now in it as well, being so tough. But for me, as far as the Welsh regions, I'm excited to see how they compete against the big boys, the big dogs, especially with depleted squads, but earlier than they probably would have thought they would have. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to see some hidden gems come through the system and be able to go to the RDS and compete, and be able to go up to Edinburgh and have a real good go against these teams. So it's exciting. I don't know how it's going to go for the regions. I really don't. But I think it makes for a great season. I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. Thanks, Shane. If you need to go and pick up your son, then thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for your time.
No worries. Speak to you all. Thanks, guys.
Can I go to Kieran next, please, who's been waiting patiently, and then I'll come back to Matt, who I know has got a couple more questions, and then Stephen, if you want to ask anything World Cup related, no problem at all. So if I can go to Kieran next.
Thanks, Antonia. For Stephen Ferris. Hey, Stevie, how are you?
Yeah, all good. All good. I was just reading about Darren Cave's whiskey that he's brought out. I know everybody's bringing out whiskey or gin these days, so better make sure and send him a text and get a bottle of it.
If it's as good as his moustache, stay clear.
True.
I'll not start with my obvious question that you accuse me of asking you every time. But Stephen, you look at the Ulster squad, I think they lost 7 internationals, 12 players altogether, brought in 1 international and Dave Ewers and a couple of, I don't want to be cruel here, but journeyman props. I mean, how can you compete when you've lost so much experience out of your squad? And they're talking, obviously, we need the homegrown players. Are the homegrown players good enough?
Yeah, Kieran, it's as I mentioned earlier on to Michael, it just feels like it's a huge season. It feels like it is a transitional season for us. We know that Dan's got a longer contract than just to the end of this season, and obviously Johnny Bell as well, and Dan Soper. We'll see at the end of this season if things need to be freshened up. But is it a time now where, instead of writing on the whiteboard in pre-season about what your objective and goal is, and every season you write at the top to win the URC, to compete in the European Cup and try and win the European Cup, is it now time to put at the top of that, bring through homegrown talent that are going to help us try and achieve those goals in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time? Quite possibly, the likes of, I know Cameron Doak, like he's only 18, 19 years of age, but somebody like him, the future tight head for Ulster Rugby for the next 10 years, he probably is. So getting minutes into him in competitive rugby. Looking ahead, like Rob Herring, he's probably not going to be around for too much longer. So, I know we've got Tom Stewart coming through, but who's next after him? We got to keep producing players and specifically homegrown players. We don't seem to be going down across the border as much either. He likes it. Look, Greg Jones and a couple of the other guys that were brought in 4 or 5 years ago. That they seem to be looking towards this. I know there's been the amalgamation with the Queen's University and making them like their kind of hub to nourish their talent through into the academy system. And we'll see how that works out as well. I know that relationship's only come about over the last kind of 6 months or so. So we'll see how that feeds into the club game here in Ireland, see how Queens go on that, and see what players are getting game time and playing well, and then see if they could give an opportunity for Ulster. But yeah, as I mentioned there, Kieran, it feels like it's going to be a bit of a transitional season for Ulster Rugby.
And as you sort of alluded to there, obviously Stephen Kitsworth, world-class prop, no arguments, but they throw big money at him when there's other sort of parts of the team that look neglected, as you say, no 7, 10 needs a big year. Is this just an Ulster problem where they throw big money at one player and it necessarily doesn't work out, as you say, few of them injured and stuff?
Yeah, well, you're always going to take a bit of a risk, aren't you, with players? Like Stephen Kitsworth, we could say he's been so durable. He could come over to Ulster and wreck his ACL and be out. A bit like RG Snyman down at Munster. I'm sure they didn't feel like they got their value for money in the first couple of seasons. So, he's rumoured to be on substantial coin, and he wouldn't be leaving South Africa in the Stormers to come over. I'm sure he had numerous offers from French clubs as well that were waving the pay checks at him. So, yeah, I'm sure he's getting very, very well paid. The only thing for me is that he does carry a hell of a lot of ball as well, and that's something that we miss in the pack for Ulster. And he's a good carrier. He will carry through traffic. He's not going to stand somebody up and fend somebody and make a 20-yard break, but he is a very good ball carrier in the tight exchanges. With Dave Ewers in that as well, I think that certainly adds to our pack. If you're not playing Ian Henderson, you're having to play Alan O'Connor and Kieran Treadwell. And Kieran Treadwell seems to have taken a couple of steps backwards over the last 6 months or so. I'm not sure if it's just been that he's been out of favour within the Ireland squad and it's maybe knocked his confidence a little bit. We'll soon find out, Kieran. But yeah, it's. I don't think Ulster are in a position to go out and splash any more cash. Is my brutally honest answer. I don't think there is the cash flow that was maybe there 4 or 5 seasons ago. We need to keep bums on seats as well. And we need to play an attractive brand of rugby, especially at home, and make sure that we make Kingspan a fortress once again. Because at the end of last season, it sort of got away from us that. So we'll wait and see how it goes.
And just obviously the last one, it's well documented. It's 17 years since they've won anything. Is there one thing that you could maybe put your finger on that they need to do better to not even win it, to be challenging? Because I mean, it was all sort of fell in place last year. Home quarter would have had a home semi and a home final, and then they lose to obviously Connacht, who you could say 3rd or 4th province.
Kieran, that's a good question. I met Justin Harrison, who obviously captained Ulster that year that we won. I met him there 2 weeks ago, just outside Belfast at a friend's house. Had 2 or 3 hours chatting away with him, reminiscing, having good crack, and talking about the good old days, and talking about some of the games that we played in, going away to Musgrave Park, beating Munster away from home, going away to the Ospreys, beating them, going away to Edinburgh, I think, beating them. And we had this ridiculously hard edge. Like, you'd Neil Best, an absolute maniac, one of the hardest guys you'd ever played rugby with. You'd Roger Wilson as well, playing brilliant rugby. Myself in the back row, Justin Harrison. Yes, he maybe got yellow carded, but he was an enforcer. I know he folded like the deck chair every time he carried the ball, but he didn't need to carry the ball. It was just his presence and the way we get stuck into malls, the way we fought for one another, the way we trained. There was just a constant edge to us all the time, and I don't see that with the current Ulster team. I don't see an edge. I don't see somebody that I would be not fearful or scared of, but like wary about when I went up against them. And I think opposition probably feel that same way when they play against Ulster. They're almost too easy to play against. it's to get into too much of a comfort zone. So that's something that I could maybe answer your question there, is that 17 years ago it felt that we had a bit of a nasty streak about our side in Ulster, which got us over the line against Shane Williams 17 years ago and playing against the Ospreys.
Cheers, Stevie. Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks, Kieran. I'll go back to Pat now, if I may, please.
Hey, how's it going? Sorry, I'll just be quick, Stevie, and then Chris as well. Just same question I asked to Shane, basically. Just players to kind of keep an eye on, so then I can bluff to people and pretend I know everything about rugby.
And it's going to be interesting to see, Pat, if Craig Casey gets a really good run in the Munster jersey this season. Will Conor Murray keep playing? I think he's under contract, isn't he? National contract for until the end of the season. But
yeah,
will there be a change into the guard there? Jack Crowley as well. So will we try and see a 9-10 partnership, not just for the future of Ulster, but for the future of Ireland? Possibly, or will it be Jameson Gibson Park and young Prendergast, or Harry Byrne? So I'd just like to keep an eye on to see, because it's such an important axis for Ireland. But, where's that going to come from? Is it going to come from a Leinster Munster? I don't think it is. I think it's going to be, have to come from one of the provinces that are playing regularly week in and week out. So I really like to keep an eye on that. Any other youngsters coming through? Anybody up in Ulster? Young Sheridan. He's a seems like he's a hard player. He played against La Rochelle last year. He can play back row or second row, and he probably has that little bit of edge that I sort of referenced there with Kieran. He does have a bit of a nasty edge about him. So whether they play him at 6 or they play him in the second row, it'll be interesting to see. And yeah, he's somebody that's got a hell of a lot of potential, and he's obviously very raw. But yeah, somebody like Joe McCarthy, who I think he's a very coachable player, and has the same presence about him that maybe Joe has. So that's somebody from an Ulster point of view, and maybe even just young Prendergast at Leinster. How much game time is he going to get this season with Harry Byrne and Ross Byrne there? We'll wait and find out, and see how he goes. A couple of the other under-20s. What do you call the number 8 from Munster? Remind me, Pat. Yeah. There's chat coming out that Pete, he might not play as much next season, and also is Coombs the answer for Ireland? It seems like he's probably not. So Gleeson could be an unbelievable find to come into another World Cup cycle. I'm watching him in the under-20s. He's a big lad. He is so explosive. He makes yards for fun. He eats people up. And yeah, he's going to be a real good player for Munster and hopefully Ireland in the next couple of years.
Perfect. And then just throw that to you as well, Kristen, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. Well, somebody Stephen mentioned there, Sam Prendergast, somebody that I've seen play 20s, and I know how talented a player he is, whether he would maybe potentially go to Connacht or whether he would stay at Leinster and then go to Connacht, then come back to Leinster, but he's obviously staying there. So he's somebody that I think really is worth keeping an eye on. He's not really a youngster, but somebody new to the leagues, Jake Pelledri, Zebre. I think he really is a phenomenal player. It looks like the hardest man on earth to tackle, and he's not the biggest back row going, but I'm interested to see how he goes in a team that struggled. It'd be good to see that. In terms of maybe one in Wales, Jan Lloyd as well, the Welsh guys played at Bristol, coming back to Scarlets. I think Scarlets have recruited quite well, and as Shane said, retained quite a few of the players. So I think the league could suit him from what I see of him. Kind of all-rounder, 10, 15 winger, can play him anywhere. I think he could. The URC maybe is a platform for him to show his stuff. And in Scotland, there's plenty of young players. We're aware of quite a few of them. Rory Darge, for instance, we all know, but he really is something special. Jamie Dobby as well at Glasgow. How much game time will he get in that 9 jersey with Ali Price there, with George Horn there? But I think he is. He he's definitely one in the next cycle to look at. And then over at Edinburgh, again, somebody that's we know of, but is still quite young, Ewan Ashman. Edinburgh signed Ewan Ashman, hooker, and if his set piece can deliver, he's a lad that can score some pretty stunning tries and carry, and his big moments, a big flash, aggressive, really aggressive as a ball handler, as a player, but defensive as well. And maybe one we've not heard so much of, who's been training really well with Edinburgh and played the opening couple of pre-season matches, a young fullback called Nathan Sweeney. He's came through the academy. He's been injured a little bit, played the 18s and hasn't played too much under 20s, but I know Sean and the coaches rate Nathan Sweeney pretty highly. So some there, but yeah, like just looking through some of the squads, my mind always goes to the attacking players rather than defensive players, but there's plenty to choose from, I think, in the attacking sense.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
No, it's Pat.
Cheers.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, so I will go back to Stephen now, who I know probably wants to talk about South Africa and the World Cup. So, Stephen, if you've got any more questions.
We're all experts about all the teams now in South Africa. It's buzzing around the dinner tables. I'd like to ask Chris if, reflecting on the quarterfinals of the All Blacks in Ireland and South Africa in France in particular, does games like that potentially make them vulnerable for the next game? In a sense that they could be, I'm not sure spent is the right word, but we saw at the last World Cup, England knocked out the All Blacks and were heavily favoured for the final, and then lost to South Africa. So it's just your thoughts on that.
Like the end of the Ireland New Zealand game was, we all know, was ridiculous. Everyone's quoted the 37 phases, but Ireland actually defended for a minute before they turned the ball over. So they'd already done a minute full on, and then I think it was something like 5 minutes 20. It could have been about 6 minutes 20 at the end of the game of physical brutality. Do individual games cause the next game week to be a problem? Probably not. I think the guys that are fit enough and dynamic and powerful enough and well conditioned, recover so well. 3 or 4 weeks in a row of it definitely has an effect. Getting to that emotional state and that physical state back to back to back, I think would have an effect. So I think if you were New Zealand or particularly South Africa this week, I think you would really have to consider how to get over the exertions of the last couple of weeks. And I think it's more what you do in your training, how you structure your training that week. I don't think you can upskill in a week. I don't think you can get particularly better or a better clarity or understanding. So you probably train less so you can deliver the same level of performance the week later. So I think the effect probably is, well, it's remedied by what you do in training. But I must say, like, watching on as somebody who's played for, I've not played for a long time, but I did play for a long time. That intensity, not to make an error, at the end of matches where every single ball is being contested. It's not as if there was any contacts that were less fierce or more or less intense. It was just inspiring to see the level of which at the end of the game the actual phases continue to be at. So I think it can have effect if it's not managed properly through the week, but the effect's probably more so a cumulative effect over 2 or 3 weeks rather than just 1 week. But I hope they had plenty of ice after those games, because it was brutal, physically brutal. And this week will be the same. And then obviously whoever makes it through to the final will be the same again. So I think acknowledging it's there, changing your training week or to make sure you can cope with it, and then acknowledging the fact that you're going to have to do that again the next game week is probably a good way of managing it.
Thanks, and just to Stephen. England, they actually, what's interesting is their ability to have gained clarity through the World Cup. Initially going into the tournament, there were, there was a lot of criticism and everything flying around. What does it say about the team and the coaching staff to kind of adapt that quickly and and sort of gain clarity through the tournament and And could they be, are people perhaps underestimating them before the game against the Springboks?
It's really difficult to know with England if they have turned the corner or not. I don't believe that they have, to be honest. I just think the opposition has maybe dictated the way the results have fallen for England. I firmly believe if France and Ireland, who are currently out of the Rugby World Cup, played against Fiji last weekend, that they would have beaten them by 30 points. But that's World Cups. That's knockout rugby, and England have found themselves in the position at the start where they had to get off to a good start and win the first game. And if they did that against Argentina, then that would make things so much easier moving forward in the competition. So yeah, people saying that they are lucky. People are saying, oh well, it's England are just there because of the way the draw worked out 3 years ago and everything else. To a certain degree, I think there is a little bit of truth in that. However, Steve Borthwick's men were written off before the tournament to not even progress through the group. And if they did progress through the group, that they would get beaten by whoever they played in a Rugby World Cup quarterfinal. So they've obviously surpassed a lot of people's expectations. And now they find themselves in a World Cup semi against a brutal South African side who will, really go for the jugular and try and dominate every collision. And we'll see if they're up to it or not, and see if they're going to silence a few more critics with their performance. I almost felt like if France had beaten South Africa, that France would have put England away a little bit easier in a semi-final than maybe South Africa might, if that makes sense. I just think that South Africa will obviously kick the ball a bit more, and England are happy enough to defend. They've got a pretty good defense. They've lots of energy, lots of enthusiasm to get off the line and put in big hits, and it probably will be a bit more tactical than if France had played against them. So I give anybody a chance in a Rugby World Cup semi-final. I give England a chance. I give them a chance, albeit a small one. But if they could win this game, that would probably be a bigger upset than any of the other results that we've seen in the competition so far.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys.
Cheers.
That's great, Stephen. Anybody else, if you could put your hand up if there are any more questions. Otherwise, I think we're pretty much there on the hour as well. That's great. I don't think there's any more questions. Thank you very much, everybody. The only thing I was just going to ask the guys to do is similar to Shane just before we leave. Chris, just looking ahead to URC really this season, the competition, it's really grown. What are you kind of in general, what are you excited about looking forward to this new season?
It's good that you asked Shane first because it gave us time to think of an answer. Just when Shane was talking, I agree with a lot of what he said about the young players coming through and opportunity for established players to just raise the levels. But one thing that popped into my mind was just the atmosphere. So if we can get Scotstoun or Hive Stadium here, Edinburgh, and just that atmosphere when you've got real passion behind your team, and then the passion at all the grounds. I'm just really looking forward to kind of that buzz, that vibe. Probably hopefully picking up some new viewers from Rugby World Cup who've maybe not been to games before, then coming, watching an international product on the TV, coming to a club product, seeing how close to the action you can get, seeing how close to the players, feeling the speed, the intensity, the ferocity of the game, and just being in and around it. So I'm really quite excited. It seems a long time. Well, it is a long time since we've had club rugby and being close to it. So yeah, those atmospheres at the home grounds, for me, is something I'm really looking forward to. And the other thing more strategic is who breaks the top 8 from last year. I remember talking last year ahead of last season and just saying, it's getting in that top 8. It's easier said than done. 4 Irish teams, 3 South Africans, and a Scottish last year. What will that balance be like this year? Will be a Welsh region. We'll get 2 Scots in. 4 South Africans who the South African sides have recruited well, as have other teams. You know, is there a change in the guard with some of the Irish performances? It's really hard to predict that top 8. So I'm looking forward to the atmosphere building in and around the games, and also just coming into the season, come the end of the regular season, just I suppose try to figure out who the top 4 will be and who makes it into that top 8.
Thanks, Chris. That's brilliant. Stevie, same question. How hard is it? Is it looking easy to get into that top 8?
Yeah, I think what we all wanted 3 years ago was for the league to become much more competitive, and that's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what it's shown to be over the last 2 seasons. Going away from home is really a big struggle now. It's a little bit like the top 14, you know, where if you target all your home games and then try and nick 2 or 3 away, you know, you might find yourself comfortably into the top 8. You might have 1 or 2 teams that are always sitting at the top of the log, but I think there's going to be so much fighting for those other maybe 4 or 5 places in the top 8. The likes of the Scarlets coming through, Glasgow are going to be thereabouts again this year. I expect the Irish provinces to be in there, and of course, you know, maybe a couple of the South African franchises. So, yeah, it's ultra competitive. It's also a springboard for other players to show what they're made of and see if they can potentially get a Six Nations call up in a few months' time. And you know, I know the World Cup is nearly over, but it won't be long before there's another World Cup. And this league is certainly where you start building momentum and building form and building a reputation for being a big game player. And if you know a lot of the lads over the teams over the coming couple of seasons in the URC can do that, then you know hopefully they'll be playing on the biggest stage of all as well.
Thanks, Stevie. That's brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, guys, I think that's been a great session. Lovely to see everyone. Thank you very much to Chris and to Stevie for their time and for yours as well. And look forward to a good season ahead. I'll send recordings out to everyone and pictures of the gents and just details of our coverage this weekend. All 8 games are live. Okay, thanks everyone.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, folks. See you soon, guys. See everybody soon.
Cheers.
Thanks, Antonio.
Thanks.